I recognize it. I'm not totally senile. All right. Never taken a shortcut before. Well, that's actually two movies. That's Shaun of the Dead, where it first appeared, and then we decided to carry it over into Hot Fuzz. You never taken a shortcut before? That's become one of those lines that's quoted back at me quite a lot. The first time Shaun does it, he crashes through the fence. The second time, Nicholas Angel does this incredibly energetic, athletic sort of... I actually didn't do the last one. I jump, and then got a stunt guy took over, an acrobat, who did like this sideways somersault. So there you go, that's blown that myth. That was before I met Tom Cruise. After that, I did all my own somersaults. Those three films are kind of about the individual versus the collective. So you have Shaun versus zombies, Nicholas Angel versus the NWA, the Neighborhood Watch Association, and Gary versus the Blanks, which are these sort of alien invaders. None of those films were ever or will ever be sequelized. It just felt like, let's make three films that take on a genre, put a uniquely British spin on that genre, and then, you know, do something different. So that was always our plan. Jar Jar Binks makes the Ewoks look like fucking Shaft. That was Spaced, our sitcom that we did 1999 to 2001.
Jar Jar Binks makes the Ewoks look like fucking Shaft.
There's a lot of talk in the first season about how much my character Tim loved Star Wars, which was basically me. And I apologize to all of the millennials out there who loved these films, but I was so disappointed. They even got the opening of it wrong on the projector on wherever I saw the film. So it said Wars Star. Like that first blam after 16 years when I was expecting to feel completely, was like ruined. And I was walking back up the road with a couple of British people that had been in the movies, and we were kind of walking in silence. And I said to these guys who I'd never met, I said, "Was that shit?" And they went, "Yeah, I think it was." So I went to see it again the next morning just to make sure. And then for me, at least, I didn't like it. And then I went to see The Matrix, and that was like, oh, this is how I wanted to feel watching Star Wars. So when I made the second season of Spaced, I put all of my kind of disappointment and disillusionment into my character, Tim. He burns his Star Wars toys. In a way, I was making fun of myself as an adult, getting so upset about something as ephemeral as a kind of movie. Now, whenever I see people getting upset about what is essentially children's entertainment, it's like, grow the fuck up. Do you know what I mean? It's not important. And I slightly regret the kind of Jar Jar hate as well, because there was a person on the end of all that, you know? But it's still kind of funny. I love throwing these. What you've brought... How appropriate. What you've brought me today is worth 1/4 portion. That was my cameo in The Force Awakens.
What you brought me today is worth... 1/4 portion.
Making that movie felt to me like the apotheosis of my Star Wars love, because, you know, J.J. Abrams was using a lot of practical effects. You know, there were gonk droids and Jawas and stormtroopers. I was in the desert, and I enjoyed making the film more than I enjoyed watching it even, you know, because I was on set on the Millennium Falcon when Harrison Ford and Chewbacca, I say Chewbacca because he's like a really living, breathing thing. When you meet Chewbacca, I walked into this room, and there he was, this icon of my youth, my favorite character, just stood there, living and breathing. And Jonas went, "Oh, hey, Simon, how you going?" And I was like, "Shut up! Be quiet. Just do the raw and cuddle me." I will consider that an apology, and I will consider that apology. I don't know. Is it Benji? No, it's not Benji. I recognize it. I'm not totally senile. Give me a clue. Ah, it's Scotty. Yes, of course. Of course it is. I didn't read it in the correct accent. Was that Star Trek Into Darkness? Yes, of course.
I will consider that an apology. And I will consider that apology.
I'd love to do a fourth movie. There's always kind of mutterings about it. I've not heard anything to suggest we're going to do one, but these days everything becomes very gritty, and I think it's this weird kind of justification of how do we make this thing which is essentially, you know, quite youthful? Although I would argue that the original Star Trek series wasn't childish. It was actually quite sophisticated. Things don't have to be gritty and dark to be for adults. You know, science fiction doesn't have to be full of death and swearing and, you know, questionable morals to be consumed by adults. It just has to be thoughtful and imaginative. Now, I'd like to see Star Trek kind of get back to the spirit of the original series a little bit and, you know, get out there on that 5-year mission. Although we've completed our 5-year mission, so if we did another one, it would be interesting to see what we do next. What the fuck does what was WTF mean? That's the world's end.
WTF? What the fuck does WTF mean?
That was Edgar's joke, and I remember high-fiving him on that day. That was a film where Edgar and I kind of decided to change things up. Usually with Shaun and with Hot Fuzz, Nick was the kind of funny, chaotic one, and I was the straighter character. With this, Gary King was the chaotic force of the movie. And we wanted to make a darker, more adult movie than the last two. We thought, let's write a comedy about a suicidal alcoholic. And that ended up being The World's End. And I love The World's End. It doesn't get as much love as the other two, but I think the reason for that is that because we decided not to try and get that. You know, we wanted to make something that was dark, about being middle-aged. I'd recently got sober, and so there's a lot of me in Gary, a lot of Gary's more chaotic sort of, you know, behavior is based on my own behavior at the time, because when you're in that situation, it is the most important thing. You grow a new personality, and that personality's only desire is to obtain that thing. We took that to the extreme. You know, Gary risks the world for his final pint. And that's kind of what you do. That's what you do as an alcoholic. It becomes the personality that leads you everywhere. You remember I told you one day you were going to take things too far? This is me speaking, by the way, not him. That is from Mission Impossible Rogue Nation.
You remember I told you one day you were going to take things too far? This is me speaking, by the way, it's not him.
Rogue Nation was really fun because it was like a buddy movie with Ethan and Benji. And there's a whole scene when I shout at Ethan, you know, I'm your friend. We always laugh about the fact that Benji's the only person that can shout at Ethan, is allowed to shout at Ethan, and would shout at Ethan. And their relationship is very sweet in that regard, you know. My relationship with Tom is similar to Benji's in that I was like, you know, I'd never been to Hollywood when I made Mission Impossible 3. I'd never worked in the Hollywood system before. And the first time I got to work there, I was working with the biggest movie star in the world. In the same way that Benji, when he starts to work as a field agent in the IMF, is working with the IMF's top agent. I can talk to Tom in ways that other people can't, you know, because our relationship is like that. He responds to irreverence, you know. I think he appreciates it because everyone's always careful about what they say around him. I'm not. This scene actually got me the role in Ready Player One. I got a call from Steven Spielberg, as you do, and he said, I'd love you to come in and play this character in Ready Player One. I really enjoyed that scene where you were bomb-laden. I woke up one morning married to a pineapple, an ugly pineapple, but I loved her. That's Buck from Ice Age.
I woke up one morning married to a pineapple. An ugly pineapple. But I loved her.
We tried lots of different voices for Buck. There was sort of a swashbuckling kind of type voice at first, like this. And then they wanted him a bit more sort of, you know, he's a bit more Cockney. So then Buck appeared just like that. As soon as we got that, it was like we hit the ground running. I love doing Buck sessions because they're just always outrageous. You know, the weird thing is I've only met Dennis Leary and John Leguizamo of the cast. I've never met Ray Romano, never met Queen Latifah, never met the Possums or anybody, you know. I really hope we have some sort of premiere this time so I can meet everybody. I'm part of their herd and we've never met. It's crazy. On the contrary, it was childishly simple, simply childish, I agree. That is from Tintin.
On the contrary, it was childishly simple. Simply childish, I agree.
That was the first time we worked with Steven, and for Nick and I, it was a big deal because we'd bonded on movies when we became friends, and Spielberg's movies were among them in, you know, their droves, particularly Close Encounters, which we both loved. So to get to work with Steven and kind of ask him questions about his career and He talks very freely about stuff. He loves movies, so he loves talking about movies. It was like a bit of a dream come true, really. We were on the set of Tintin and we said, oh, we're making this movie called Paul. It's about an alien who's been on Earth for like 50 years and he's been secretly kind of influencing popular culture. And we had this idea that, you know, when you were writing E.T., you call Paul for a few ideas. And so we wrote this little scene where Paul kind of gives him the idea for E.T.'s healing ability. But Stephen is the one that likes the idea of it being his finger. And then he says, trust me, which is, you know, Indiana Jones. And Stephen was like, yep, sure, I'll do it. Maybe it's not a code word. Maybe it's just a really expensive bunny appendage. That is from Mission Impossible 3.
Maybe it's not a code word, maybe it's just a really, really expensive bunny appendage.
JJ is the king of the back channel. If he can, he'll go straight to you rather than like send an offer out to representatives and then it gets back to you and then there's all this kind of middlemaning. And he just sort of said, hey, Simon, this is JJ Abrams. Listen, do you want to come and be in Mission Impossible 3? I kind of went, yeah, okay, sure. And then he did that with everything subsequently. Star Trek was an email that said, do you want to play Scotty? One sentence. And then Star Wars, he took me out to dinner one night to just have a chat and said, do you want to play a blobfish in Star Wars? And I was like, sure. And it was so exciting for me, for my first and, you know, potentially last Mission Impossible, to be talking about that thing. I expound the legend of the rabbit's foot, which is this unknown piece of tech which could spell the end for humankind. In the classic J.J. Abrams style, it's this sort of mystery that you never quite understand. When you go and see The Final Reckoning, that ball was tossed up in the air and caught very artfully by Christopher McQuarrie in a very cool way. Take car, go to Mum's, kill Phil, grab Liz, go to the Winchester, have a nice cold pint, and wait for all this to blow over. This has become a meme. Whenever there's any sort of crisis, I get little memes of Shaun raising a pint, from Shaun of the Dead, obviously.
Go to Mum's, kill Phil, sorry, grab Liz, go to the Winchester, have a nice cold pint, and wait for all this to blow over.
This is from the plan scene from Shaun of the Dead, which is a very Edgar Wright sort of signature moment when you see the plan realized visually in its various sort of formats until they decide to go to the Winchester pub, which was based on a pub that Nick Frost and I were in constantly, called the Shepherds. In North London, it's called the Boogaloo now, if you want to visit. The Boogaloo is a fantastic pub, and Edgar used to get annoyed at us for never wanting to leave it. So that became part of the Shaun of the Dead story. And it did eventually all blow over. Actually, it hasn't blown over. It's been 20 years and people are still watching the film, which is great.